Welcome back to Coworker Radio. I'm Catherine Raymock.
And I'm Jane Walker-Wood.
And we are here with UCSB professor and business author and so much more, one of our favorite guests and parts of our show. You can email your questions if you'd like to John Greathouse at askjohn@coworkradio.com, or you can also go to our website at coworkradio.com and find it as well. Also, you can listen to John on our website, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube as well. Always good to see you, John. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Jane?
I'm doing good. I've got a question here from Jen, and she read your blog and watched your interview that you did with Robbie Bach, who founded Xbox, and she wanted to clarify, why is Robbie considered an intrapreneur versus an entrepreneur?
Right. Yeah, those are confusing terms, and I appreciate you referencing the UCTV interview that is now on iTunes. So if anybody wants to go look at some of the old, that's actually where most people are accessing it, is at iTunes, UC Television. Innovator Stories is what it's called. Yeah, Robbie was a fun interview to conduct because he's one of those rare people that has entrepreneurial tendencies, absolutely, in his soul, but he also has an entrepreneurial abilities. And what I mean by that is, many of the same characteristics that have that burning passion to not give up that an entrepreneur has to have, oftentimes we don't do well in larger organizations because we just don't want to take the time. We don't have the patience to explain ourselves, and we're typically thinking 3 and 4 steps ahead, and for us to have to go back internally, and it's just very frustrating. So that's why typically you go out and start your own business, or you start a business with a handful of people because you don't spend time on that.
So is it intra as in introverted?
No. It's intra in the terms of you're within a larger organization and you have I will call them political skills without any negative connotations. You have the political skills to sit in meetings. And so an entrepreneur is going to sit down with a venture capitalist or an angel investor, and they're going to pitch why you should give me money. An entrepreneur is going to sit down with the CFO inside of a bigger company and explain why you should give me money. But that explanation is very different. That explanation might have a 50-page business plan. I think Robbie said the original business plan for Xbox, we should make that clear, he was with Xbox inside of Microsoft, and he created that company out of, from scratch, he and his team. I think his original business plan was over 200 pages. That's not the kind of discipline the typical entrepreneur is going to express.
And so in the end, Microsoft owned Xbox
100%.
Rather than him going out and starting
Right.
it. And obviously it made good financial sense for him too, I'm sure.
That's another characteristic
Yeah.
that's I'm glad you raised that distinction, because I think an entrepreneur is frustrated that they're not capturing more of that wealth creation. An entrepreneur is going to trade off the safety and security of being inside a big organization with that payday. So I'm sure Robbie did quite well. He retired as a relatively young man.
At 49, I think I read there.
So don't shed any tears for Robbie. But you don't. It's just the mechanics of the business, right? If you start a business, you're typically going to own more of that business than if you're part of a bigger company.
Now, another interesting thing about that interview, which to me didn't make sense with, because he seemed, as you say, somebody who's writing 200 pages, but yet he didn't turn the Xbox on before saying, we're going to turn the Xbox on in front of all those people. They turned it off for the first time, and that didn't work.
Well, that's one reason why I wanted Robbie to come speak to my students and to be on the show, because he's so humble that he admitted that, it's a public mistake. It's on. You could find it online, actually, if you want to Google it. But he was very humble and laughed about it. And he said what happened is that morning they called an audible. Somebody said, hey, we might be able to do a live demo. This was a big deal. Everyone was wondering, what is Microsoft going to do to fight Nintendo and fight some of these other players out there? And so it was he made a mistake. At the last minute, they said, okay, let's go ahead and go live with it.
For the first time. Let's turn it on for the first time.
But you get excited. That's that
And there wasn't even the blue screen of death. Right?
No, well, Tim Cook just did that. Do you remember that?
No, I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah, it was. It wasn't the iPhone 10, but it was the one previous. And yes, it was, because it was facial recognition, and it didn't recognize his face.
Oh my gosh!
Oh,
I give people a pass on that, because I think that shows a humanity, and it shows they just are so excited about it in that moment. They want to share it with everyone. So I kind of, that's just my personality. I kind of gave it to him. The press didn't give it to them. The press skewered them and made them, look
But it
foolish,
worked out for them in the end. Like you said, you don't feel sorry for them.
One demo.
I like that term, intrapreneur. I think that actually, when I'm thinking about my own self, because I have a lot of businesses, but I kind of need to be in that cocoon of other people and the structure of that. So that's very interesting. I think you mentioned in an interview a couple of months ago something about companies, and we were talking about how some of the younger generation doesn't really fit into the typical mold of the 9 to 5. And you were saying that some of the companies were forward thinking and giving like one day a week where they could work on other projects.
Right.
Does this fit into that?
I think so. I think that satisfies that entrepreneurial spirit within a large organization. Some folks listening know that I remember that I was a part of Citrix, and one thing Citrix started after I left, and I thought this was a really good idea. They allowed people to have side jobs, basically encourage them to some extent to, you didn't have to hide it or act like you weren't doing it. They were saying, you can go ahead and moonlight. We'd like it to be something that's related, in some way, but it doesn't have to be. And the reason they did that is they didn't want to lose people that wanted to be entrepreneurial. So they wanted to give them an entrepreneurial outlet within the organization. And they even set up an accelerator incubator here in town before they were acquired.
Sure they didn't do that because they didn't want to give people raises?
No, could be. I don't know.
Well, that's another great way of keeping your employees happy, though,
Right.
because then they can fulfill their dream and not feel frustrated on the job.
Exactly. And you want a certain number of entrepreneurial people in your organization. You don't want everyone running around feeling like they're entrepreneurs. But I think a lot of people are like you in the sense that they feel like they want a paycheck or they want to know that their insurance is going to be covered and things like that. It's very normal. It's very rational to feel that. It's irrational to feel otherwise. But at the same time, you want to create and you want to build and you want to do new things. There are certainly many opportunities within large organizations, and I would say for any young person that's listening to this, ask when you're being recruited and you're interviewing, ask about those opportunities. What are the new initiatives that this company's pursuing? I think I would flourish in a new initiative versus something that's...
These are letting you work out of these co-working facilities and out of your home.
Right.
Is the term new? Is it a new word, entrepreneur?
Not necessarily.
No. Yeah. Hey, John, thank you. We're running out of time this week, but we get you next week.
All right, I'll be back.
Send your questions in to coworkradio.com. You can find it there. And also, don't forget, you mentioned the iTunes UC TV, and it is called Innovator Stories. Is that correct? Yeah, check that out as well. John, we'll see you next week.
All right.
You are listening to Co-work Radio here on KZSB 1290 AM, and we'll be back right after this.